Hey, tennis fans, you are listening to Matchpoint Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We are also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. This episode brought to you by Hotel X. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre for our Wimbledon preview episode. Mike, yes, your favorite tournament of the year is officially getting underway.
I can't hide my excitement. It's definitely my favorite 2 weeks of the year. No disrespect to the other majors or any other tournaments on the calendar, but well documented that that was the tournament I grew up with, as I think many people did, including our guest today, who you had a chance to speak with, broadcaster Nick Lester, and we'll get to that in a few moments. But I think in his interview, if I don't spoil too much here, he mentioned how Wimbledon is the centerpiece of the British summer anyways, but I would argue it's the centerpiece for many tennis fans' summers, no matter where they come from.
Yeah, very much so. And he, I think, said similar to what you've said is many tennis players, even or fans, their memories of first watching the sport come with watching Wimbledon. And that's definitely the case with me. Growing up, just being in, summer tennis camps at the Kingston Tennis Club. And when we turn on the TV, in July in the mornings, it was Wimbledon that was on. So it was definitely the first major that I had that easy access to and took in. And for me, it, of course, always that carries that tradition and prestige. And so it's definitely one of the very most special. And Nick has a great background in the sport from someone who played competitively, clearly has just a great passion for it and a voice, one of the more understated voices, I would say, in the broadcasting business, but he's done it for a very long time and he's really good at it.
And the British voice, I mean, the accent, we had to get a guest
Of
that could
course.
just add a little bit more authenticity to it. And, I think kids probably fall in love with Wimbledon because it coincides with the start of summer break. And I would
Yeah.
imagine it's probably the same for kids over in Europe as well, or generally in that time frame. But for us, it was always like, all right, school just ended. We're home. Maybe the parents are working. They're not paying attention how much TV we're watching. And if you're into sports, you're going to be automatically captivated by, I think, the green grass of Wimbledon. That was certainly part of it because, yeah, I played tennis on hard courts and clay courts, but I'd never even seen a grass court up close. So, often we forget that we all fall in love with the sport, or many of us do, when we're kids, and that's when we're hooked. And I think we forget sometimes just how many kids are watching tennis, especially during the summertime.
No, exactly. Very well said. I think without further ado, let's listen into my conversation with tennis broadcaster Nick Lester. Very happy to be joined by international tennis commentator. You've heard his voice all over the place, and he comes on as a first-time guest to Matchpoint Canada. Happy to welcome on Nick Lester to the show. Nick, great to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, and I know you obviously have a busy schedule, traveling around the world, broadcasting events. I guess for starters, how excited are you to work the upcoming fortnight here in Wimbledon and get going?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like it, to be honest with you. Obviously, being from the UK, having grown up with it being the centerpiece of a British summer, there's always that extra element of excitement. I think, I always say to people always talk to me about the majors, and I always say to people they're like four different siblings, the
Mhm.
majors. They're all completely different.
Yeah.
They've all got different personalities. And I think Wimbledon is so unique. I always liken it to the Masters at Augusta. I've never been to Augusta, but I always liken it to the Masters because I sense that there is a lot of similarities between the two. The uniqueness of Wimbledon is something very special, very, very different, obviously. I was there yesterday having a wander around the grounds, just watching a bit of practice and looking around, see who was there. And yeah, they're good to go. That it's a club that's always looking to innovate and move forwards. And I think they've tried to, make enhancements again this year. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Matchpoint Canada. If you'd like to follow along every week, give us a like below. Hit the subscribe button as we're trying to make 15,000 subs. Yeah, I have not had the pleasure yet of visiting Wimbledon. The word that comes to mind every time I think of the All England Club is prestige. Do you almost feel that when you set foot on the grounds in a sense?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, Ben. I'm actually a member of Wimbledon as well, so I get to see it a lot outside of the 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So I'm there a fair bit, and it's obviously very, very different when you're in those 2 weeks. And it's been fascinating this year for me to see the last few months in terms of how it builds up. When you're there, sort of in the spring and the winter, very different. But it's, ultimately, Ben, and this is what I think people find fascinating. Ultimately, it's a tennis club. That's what it is. It just happens to be a very big tennis club that opens its doors for 2 weeks. So it's very unique. They pride themselves on kind of being the benchmark, I think, for professional tennis, and they do all they can to achieve that. So, yeah, I think players. I'm not going to sit here and say it's every player's favorite major because I don't think it is. But I think it's certainly, for a lot of players, obviously, when they are kids, and Djokovic talked about this yesterday, it's the one that often they watch and it's the one that they want to win.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. I'd love to dig into, some of the favorites, but before we do that, I'd love to know a bit more about your background in the sport of tennis. I understand. I believe you pursued a professional career. Where did you sort of grow up playing, and when did you have those ambitions to make sort of tennis a regular part of your everyday life?
I mean, I played tennis, Ben, from the age of about 10. I was supported a lot by mum and dad, my parents who traveled with me a lot. I was very, very small up to a young age, up to about 16, 17. I didn't really grow, so I wasn't much of a junior in the UK, wasn't much on the radar, but I grew quite late, developed physically quite late. And then I always say to people I played semi-professionally because I think that's a fair sort of assumption of where I was at. I had a few ATP points. But then stopped when I was kind of 21, 22, just realized I wasn't going to be good enough. But, I've never really stopped. I love the game. I love playing now. Always got a racket in my hand, trying to play 2 or 3 times a week if I can. Not quite as easy with family and whatnot. But tennis is in my blood. I live for the sport. I love it. And, it's certainly brought me a lot. I think I look back on my tennis playing days where I was there for 3 or 4 years and where I am now. It's been a long road, but I think, I definitely wouldn't be where I am now in terms of broadcasting if it wasn't for the tennis that I played at a young age.
And just to get into the broadcasting side of things, when was that an avenue you felt this could be something I could pursue?
Yeah, so probably 21, 22, I stopped playing, got my coaching qualifications. I thought, let's do some coaching. Didn't really enjoy that. So it just happened that a very small radio station where I was living at the time had an opportunity for some sports presenters. It was all voluntary work, so it was unpaid work. But I went in initially and I effectively then learnt on the job. I started from scratch. I started doing some football reporting, local football matches. I started doing more and more rugby, different other sports. And I ended up hosting and presenting a show that they had on a Saturday afternoon, a 4-hour regional sports show, which was incredible. I loved every minute of it. And I wasn't, it was all unpaid, but I was coaching during the week. So I used to look forward to Saturdays. And that gave me a really good grounding, broadcasting wise, because I was so raw, but I was learning on the job. And gave me a variety of roles. I then moved on to a station in London called LBC Radio, which was growing at the time. They enhanced their sports coverage, so I started doing more on their sports desk, freelancing 2-3 days a week for them, and just then started to get into tennis, obviously where I wanted to go. So I think I had my first ever tennis gig was Radio Wimbledon, probably around 2008 time. Did a couple of years of Radio Wimbledon, which was brilliant, and then I started to get some work here for TV networks, Sky. And then the big break for me was ATP Media's coverage that really expanded around the time of probably 2011, and around that time, they began to show more tennis. They needed more commentators. They started doing the 500s, the 250s. So that was a huge opportunity for me. And I sort of became one of their main guys on the world feed around that time, obviously working a lot with Robbie Koenig, who you would know, Jason Good, all those sorts of guys. And again, it was so great for me because I was learning from them at the same time. So got the opportunity to travel the world, which I did for almost 10 years up to COVID, covering the Masters series, the 500s, and just a wonderful opportunity. I always count myself very fortunate that I had the opportunity. But just got to sit. And I look back now and on that sort of 10-year period where I was front and center for the likes of Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and fully appreciate what a privilege that was.
One of the, I think, understated arts of broadcasting, which Nick, I think you're great at, is sometimes knowing when to chime in and share more, and knowing
Mm.
when to let a match breathe and speak for itself. Did that take you a little bit of time to figure out, or was that just sort of a sense for you in the role?
I say this to people all the time, Ben, but I've always gone by the less is more mantra. That's always been my attitude. And I think one thing I've always tried to instill is that it's not about me, it's about the players. So my job, my role as a commentator is only to try and add additional information of value. That has been absolutely paramount for me. I don't want to, as a commentator, I think there's nothing worse as a tennis commentator than getting in the way of the tennis. And the amount of people that I speak to in the public, obviously over the years, who get irritated by commentators over talking. And again, maybe I grew up in Great Britain, where I was lucky in that broadcasting over here probably was that very much that trend.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't, it's slightly different in the States, I think, and I'm not being disrespectful to them, but probably there is a bit more discussion in the States. There is a bit more, just a bit more comment, I think. And
Yeah.
for me, that was never something that I wanted to go down that road. I always thought the pictures are there, the tennis is there. Let's just add some value to what I can see. If I can't add value to it, I lay out. And I think that's just something I've always tried to bring to commentary. It's the pictures and the sounds are so important. And also not disrespecting people's knowledge, because people can see what's going on the screen. It's not for me to tell them the obvious. I've always felt that an important part of it as well. Try and add value where you can to a viewer, and also understand and think. I'm always asking myself, who is watching this match? Who is watching this match? Who am I talking to? And I think largely, and I've always gone by this, I've always thought to myself that if people are watching at home, they probably have a base knowledge of tennis. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I've always gone by. So I don't want to disrespect their knowledge by throwing in some or dumbing down the coverage, if you like. I've always tried to accommodate tennis players, tennis fans, and just add another layer to the tennis. They're the sort of philosophies that I've always worked by.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic mantra. If we talk about some of the tennis action that we've seen, maybe just with the grass court lead up in terms
Mm.
of the men's side, and I'm curious to ask, you were just working the exhibition in Hurlingham, and I think the main player that's on everybody's mind going into Wimbledon was Novak Djokovic, and how has he looked? I believe you had a chance to watch him up close, front and center. How did Novak look to you as we head into the All England Club?
Listen, I was surprised. I thought he looked great. I thought the movement wise in the first two or three games, he played Daniil Medvedev. I thought the movement in the first couple of games, particularly to the right, was a little bit apprehensive, only to be expected, I think. But after that, I thought he moved great. I thought his serve was outstanding, as we know it is anyway. That's a given these days. He used the slice backhand really intelligently. And to be honest with you, he actually made Medvedev look fairly second rate, which I was very surprised
Wow.
about. Medvedev, obviously, on a grass court. Yes, he made the semis last year, but I still think Medvedev, being as tall as he is, grass is always going to be a bit tricky for him still. And I thought Djokovic, honestly, looked very, very sharp. Now, how that translates to a best of five over 2 weeks, am I sitting here saying he's going to win the tournament? Probably not. But you know what? If he can get through the first 3 or 4 rounds relatively stress-free, relatively quickly, I think he's going to be in business. And he's going to be a threat because, as he said yesterday in his press conference, it was a fascinating press conference he gave yesterday. He said, listen, a lot of people have told me concentrate on the Olympics, but there's a part of my mind that understands that this tournament means more to me than anything else. And again, going back to what we said earlier on, Djokovic, was highlighting the value of Wimbledon to him, and he could not resist the opportunity to play this, and has done everything in his powers to get fit. And you know what? It's not a bad draw he's got, is it, in that bottom half? There's some opportunities there for him, I think.
Yeah, and I think just going into this year, it's especially compelling. We have Jannik Sinner, who claimed that spot as the world number one. Carlos Alcaraz with pressure to defend his title from last season. Novak Djokovic going for number 8. I think personally, Jannik has looked like he's made a major step forward on the grass. That win in Halle and just his movement, explosiveness off the surface. What have you made of Sinner's rise, not only on grass, but just overall, maybe these past like 52 weeks, really?
Yeah, listen, I think grass is a surface that is slower than it was. That's no secret, right? I was talking last week to Neville Godwin, the coach of Alexei Popyrin, and he actually said to me the courts at Wimbledon this year are so slow, in his words. But it's still a surface that you're gonna get more reward for your serve. So I think Sinner, if you rewind 12 months ago, where Sinner's serve was, compare it to where it is now, of course, it was just after the French last year, he changed his serve. So much more value Sinner's getting out of the serve. Therefore, he's getting more free points. The rest of the game, obviously, is very much where it needs to be. I think his movement, I think we saw in Halle. I didn't see all of Halle, but from the bits I saw of it, this guy slides on a grass court. So his movement, he's comfortable. He's comfortable moving on a grass court. I don't think that's a problem. I think that was a big week for him to win over in Halle. The wins he got, obviously, against someone like Hurkacz in the final, very dangerous opponent. Can only give him confidence. I'm with you. For me, he's probably just a marginal favorite. I would have him above Alcaraz. That would be how I see it right now. And largely, I think on that week in Halle, because I think it's so important to have the matches. And also, Ben, I think the years on grass have more value because again, just seeing how this seems to sort of manifest itself. I think a lot of young players, Holger Rune, for example, I talked to his coach last week. He said to me, Holger feels much more comfortable moving on grass now. Now, I know he lost early to Jordan Thompson in Queens, but I think there's great value to that, having 2 or 3 years on the surface. I think the young guys come on it for the first year and they're not sure. There's not a bank of belief in their movement. Whereas 2 or 3 years in, there is more of that. There is more consistency in the movement and a much more a higher comfort level. So Rune could be someone that could maybe play well. I think I saw him play last week, one match, certainly looked pretty good. But I think the younger guys, obviously, the more time they have on the surface, the more they're willing to invest in it, the more likely they are to certainly go deep.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about movement on this surface. I don't know how much experience you have from your days playing on the grass courts, but is it almost a mental battle of trust when you're, working those lateral movements to trust that you're not going to turn an ankle or lose your footing? And how long does that sort of take to, not weigh on your mind where you're moving freely and not sort of thinking about it? That seems to be kind of imperative to have success on this surface.
I think probably it is a little bit innate as well. There are some players who naturally move better on it than others. Obviously, the bigger aspect is the steps, right? Because on a clay court and a hard court, you're taking bigger steps. It's the opposite on a grass court. It's smaller steps. And I think the recovery out of the corners, to be honest, on all surfaces, the recovery out of the corners is of paramount importance. It's how you recover from those wide positions. So, clearly the bounce. Again, sort of getting into the weeds a bit. Obviously, the bounce on a grass court is largely a bit lower than it is on other surfaces. So that's why I go back to the taller guys struggling. I think someone like a Zverev, a Medvedev, it's always going to be more difficult because the ball is coming lower for them. So those guys obviously at 6'6", they like the ball at waist height, at shoulder height, where they can hit down on it. You're not going to get that on a grass court, even when it's been pretty warm over here, as it has the last couple of weeks, and it's a harder surface. I think that's an aspect that you have to consider on grass, particularly in the first week of Wimbledon, because it's going to be greener, it's going to be softer until it hardens up a bit. So movement-wise, listen, I think to answer your question directly, it's very particular, particular. Someone like Casper Ruud has always struggled on it. I think Casper's, again, I was looking at Casper's not played a warm-up match at all on grass coming in, and I'm not sure he's necessarily in the right frame of mind to be sort of having a run here. Maybe he's put this week and said, you know what, I'm focusing on the clay in the Olympics. So that's another aspect, isn't it? The Olympic Games, obviously, how many players are looking at that? But yeah, movement is very unique on a grass court, very, very unique. But serve, most importantly, the serve is absolutely of critical importance on a grass court. When you look at the average rally length, I was looking at average rally length last year. It's just over 3 on a grass court. It's almost 4 on a hard and a clay court across the men's tour last year. So that gives you an idea, of just how much shorter the rallies can be and how much more serve dominates on a grass court.
I know Britain is always looking for its next champion, looking for its next hopeful winner. Obviously,
Mm.
Emma Raducanu had the breakthrough winning the U.S. Open. Jack Draper has had this phenomenal grass court lead up, not only winning a title in Stuttgart, a big victory over Carlos Alcaraz. Is he a name you've had your eye on in the past? Obviously, he was a pretty highly touted prospect, and then it felt like injuries got in the way for some time, but he seems so comfortable and dangerous on this surface.
Yeah, Jack's has, I can tell you from experience, Jack is one of the hardest working players you'll meet. There's no stone unturned with Jack. He trains a lot at the National Tennis Centre in Roehampton. I've got friends that work with him a lot, and they're always telling me that this guy invests 100%. Probably might be guilty a little bit at times of wanting it almost too much, finding that balance. Very good junior. Then have
Mm,
a few personal problems as well. Again, in his early days, I think maybe struggled a little bit with the road life. Not sure he entirely loved being on the road. I think that's something we underestimate for professional tennis players. You've got to be a nomad. You've got to love being a nomad because you're never at home. So you've got to have that aspect of, you know what, I like that living out of a hotel room. Not sure Jack did initially love that. I think he's learning to. Um, Fundamentally, I think Jack's game, probably he would be the first to admit as well, was a little bit more of a grinder, if that's the right word, a touch more passive than you need to be these days. He needs to have weapons. We've seen on the grass how much the serve has come on, how many aces he served in the Stuttgart final, 24 or 31, I think it was. He's never had those numbers before.
mhm.
Wayne Ferreira coming on board has added something else. I know that was something that James Trotman, his current coach, wanted to do as well. That didn't only come from Jack, that came from James Trotman as well. They wanted to bring on another person on board just to give him that extra 5%. So listen, Jack's got enormous hunger, enormous desire. Probably very hard on himself as well at times. So I think he's developing. It's hard, isn't it, when you've got players like, as he said, like Alcaraz winning majors at 18, 17, 18, 19. You then look at Jack at 21 and say, well, what are you doing? So, everyone has to develop at their own rate. Everyone's got their own path in the sport. There's no one way of doing it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in Jack, undoubtedly. And hopefully he can deal with the expectation, because there's going to be added expectation this week. He's the flag bearer now for British men, and hopefully he's got in him to be able to cope with that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, being the flag bearer for British men, we should give obviously the due to Andy Murray, who's been an incredible champion and a former world number one. And I have to wonder if he is going to be fit and able. He sounds like he wants to do absolutely everything in his power to give this a go for one final time at Wimbledon. Do you believe he's going to be able to take the court in singles this week?
I think you'd probably have to chain him to the locker room not to see him out there.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's my opinion. But listen, I'm no medic. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I would be, listen, I would be so surprised if we don't see him out there. Obviously in doubles, but I mean, this guy's made a career out of proving everybody wrong week in, week out, and sustaining himself. One of the most stubborn competitors the game's ever seen, maybe sports ever seen. I honestly
Mhm.
believe that. There's very few out there that are cut like Andy is. So yeah, I've got to think that he's going to be ready to go. Oh, well, not ready to go. He's going to go. I can't see how much of a challenge he's going to put out over 5 sets, but it'll be a chance for him to hopefully say goodbye and and see what's next in his career. I think there's a lot to. Only he knows what's next, but this guy, my a good friend of mine, Mark Pesci, said it very well. He said, "Oxygen, Andy Murray's tennis is oxygen to Andy Murray," and I think that
Mm.
sums it up well. This guy lives and breathes every aspect of it. And having been around some of his former coaches, tennis came first for Andy above anything else. Anything else, it was absolute priority. Like it is, I think, for the very best. It's an obsession. I think it was definitely an obsession for Murray, and goodness me, as he got a trophy cabinet that he should be extremely proud of.
That's a great sentiment. I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I don't ask about our Canadian men. Felix
Mm.
Auger-Aliassime, someone who got as high as world number six just a couple of seasons ago. He's been to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon in the past, but has obviously had some ups and downs. And Denis Shapovalov, who's sort of been working his way back from injury this season. Do you think we could see any type of run from either of these guys who I think do have the talent and explosiveness that plays well on this surface?
Couldn't agree more. Both got big games, right? Both got big serves. I think Shapovalov plays Jarry first round, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And again, I saw Jarry up close and personal yesterday at Hurlingham because he played the last match of the singles. And his movement didn't look great yesterday, I have to say. He hasn't played any, I don't think he's played any matches on grass. So that's a big opportunity for Denis, who I think, without being unfair, at times has been quite frustrating to watch as a commentator, and again as someone that's been fortunate to be on the inside a little bit, talking to players, coaches. The frustrations I think people sometimes feel a little bit with Denis's game because there's so much there, there's so much arsenal. The forehand is so big, and yet so often he has been a frustrated player to watch in terms of just the mistakes that times that he's brought to the court. Listen, it's not for me to judge and what he's done, but I think I still feel like with Denis, if he can get his mind and he can find a way to win on the bad days, that would be for me. If someone said to me, "Where does Denis Shapovalov need to improve?" For me, that would epitomize it. He needs to win when he's not playing well, because at the moment I've just not seen enough of that from him over his career. He's a great guy, Denis. You know, as you well know. Spoke to Scott Davidoff, who knows him very well. He speaks so fondly of Denis as an individual, but I think it still can be very frustrating watching Shapovalov. But you're right, on grass, great game for grass.
Yep.
Doesn't win many return games, much like Felix doesn't win many return games, but he's going to get into a lot of tie breaks because they're going to hold very often. So
yeah, they're
both very similar. Felix probably a little bit more refined in terms of what he has to offer, a little bit more disciplined, if we can put it that way, in the shot selection. But yeah, both. I watch both, particularly Denis, and I still feel like if he can refine the game a little bit, there's room for growth.
Yeah, that's very well said. Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you join the podcast. Appreciate all the great work you've done in the commentary booth over the years, and can't wait to watch, follow along, and listen for your coverage at Wimbledon. Thanks so much for joining.
Anytime, Ben.
There you have it, my chat with Nick Lester, who let me know after we finished recording. He's on center court day one for Carlos Alcaraz's first match, and he'll be in the booth with fellow Brit Tim Henman. And Nick Kyrgios will also be in that booth. So already a huge assignment to get going, and he'll be working the full 2 weeks. Yeah, you can just hear his passion for the sport, has so much knowledge about British tennis, and is one of the more experienced broadcasters in the business.
And it's not an easy job. I mean, it's
No.
easy for us watching at home and tennis fans watching at home, and we've all done this, been critical of who we're listening to. But I mean, my goodness, put yourself in that position, and you're going to be calling a match that could go anywhere from like 2 hours to, at the slams, 4 hours plus on the men's side if you get a long best of five match. I challenge anybody, no matter how much you know about tennis, no matter how suave and cool you think your voice sounds, to sit there for that long and come up with fresh things to say throughout a tennis match. And so, even though, of course, I've done it as well sometimes, you like some people a little bit more than others. And as much as, you know, you and I have worked in this job in the industry for the last several years, that's not a role that I would particularly want to fill, to be honest.
Well, look, and a couple other broadcasters we've had on many times in the past, like Mike Cation, for example, Abigail Johnson, and they talk about the challenge of it's not like you're just doing one match and you get out of there. Some of them work 8, 9 consecutive hours. So still offering that same insight, enthusiasm, energy when you're on hour 8 compared to maybe 45 minutes, 1 hour in, is exceptionally difficult. So they do just a phenomenal job. And Nick Lester does the same.
I liked his comment about how the majors are like four siblings with unique personalities.
Yeah.
And it's so true, because just as in most families, it's rare that you get a bunch of siblings who are all like cookie cutters of each other.
Yeah.
Usually it's the exact opposite. And it's the same with the slams, because of the surface, because of the cities and the venues that they're in, because of the time of year that they fall, and what's happening in the tennis calendar, right? Like, we're always so stoked for the Aussie Open because it's been so many months without tennis, not even Grand Slam tennis, but just tennis in general after the winter break.
Yep.
Then Roland Garros rolls around and you're like, okay, we've gone through 2 months of clay court warm-ups. We're ready for the the main event, and Wimbledon being on grass and being such a short season. And then by the time you get to the US Open, that has its own appeal because, it's the final major of the year and it's the last chance for your favorite player to have an impact if they haven't already at one of the biggest tournaments of the year. So each one has its appeal. The older I get, the more I think I appreciate all four of them, almost equally, to be honest.
No, I love just, I think the difference in atmospheres, as you said, city dependent, just vibe dependent, the grand tradition of Wimbledon. I'm very, very excited for. And, with Nick, we spoke a bit about the men's side and that's his main focus is the ATP. I want to get some of your takes on obviously top threats. If we look at the Wimbledon men's side, interesting draw, world number one, Jannik Sinner, like for me, I think he's the top player and the player to beat heading into the All England Club, given he has the world number one ranking and given the grass court campaign he had winning Halle.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's some players that before you see the draw, you're very high on them because of how they've been playing recently or because of their grass court experience. Then you see the draw when it's released and it's completely different. And there's
Yeah.
some players where the draw is favorable to them and there are others where it isn't. And it totally changes the dynamic and how you see things potentially unfolding. And so on the men's side, for me, I see Carlos Alcaraz as the biggest winner, to be perfectly honest, not aside from the fact that he is the defending champion, not aside from the fact that he's coming in, hot from Roland Garros as well.
Yep.
But I like his draw and the fact that the biggest seed in his section turns out to be Casper Ruud, a guy that couldn't make his dislike for grass any more known. I feel like,
Hmm.
Ruud, I feel like is just stopping in for a short little trip before he practices for the clay
Yep.
and the Paris Olympics. And so I like Alcaraz's path to the semifinals better than any of the other top players in the draw.
Yep.
One other player that I think has a nice draw and maybe a real shot here at his first major semifinal is Andre Rublev.
Okay.
And yes, he does have players like Korda, Fritz, Zverev, and Draper in there as well. But Rublev has played well on grass before. He's made the quarters of every slam. If he could just, master the inner demons that he clearly this year, as much as any year, have been affecting him.
Yep.
I'm getting a bit of that Rublev vibe. So I like both of their draws. What about yourself? Who did you see on the men's side that you think has a nice sort of path carved out for them?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I mentioned Jannik Sinner and just liking him going into the tournament, but I don't think the first week of the draw gives him any favors at all. If we circle a potential second round with Matteo Berrettini, who admittedly has battled a lot of injuries, but someone who's a former Wimbledon finalist, and I think absolutely plays his very best tennis on the grass court surface. That's a major early test if that clash happens. It's funny, I had Rublev and Korda circled as a possible intriguing round of 16 encounter, and I picked Korda to win. He had a really good grass court campaign. I believe he made a final, and he looks like he's been in really good form. I feel like he could make a push. I feel like
That one's going to be 5 sets for sure if it happens.
yeah, I hope so. I really hope we get to see that match. And, just in that same quarter there, you have Jack Draper in a section with Zverev and Fritz. And the way Draper's been playing, I mean, winning Stuttgart, that big win over Alcaraz, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets through that quarter or is at least into the fourth round with a chance at a couple of upsets.
Yeah, and you spoke with Nick Lester about Draper obviously being the big British hope this year, although
Yep.
there is hope that we see Andy Murray there as well, but not that he is a hope, but there's hope that we see him. As for Draper, how does he handle the pressure coming in as the top ranked British man and the one that I think people are figuring is their best shot of making the second week?
Hmm.
You guys talked about how traveling was something that really took some getting used to for him and how some players, you know, sort of acclimatized to that faster than others. I wonder how he acclimatizes to the pressure that the British media are going to put on him because, look, it's no secret that of all the tennis medias around the world, I think the Brits are the least kind to their own players.
They're very, very hard on them for sure. Actually, it's a possible second round match between Cam Norrie there and Jack Draper, an all British matchup. If that happens in the second round, obviously spoke about Novak Djokovic with Nick Lester, who was impressed with how he looked in that exhibition win over Daniil Medvedev. I have to say, I think Novak really got the perfect draw for the first week. Mostly dodging really dangerous players, I would say. I think if you look maybe past the first couple of rounds, Chris Eubanks, who made a quarterfinal here last year, can he back it up? Holger Rune, who Nick Lester was talking about, could he be dangerous? Dangerous. Even Hachinov is in that section if he can come through. But I would like I'm already definitely penciling in Djokovic in the quarters before I'm really worried about him, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I see Holger Rune possibly there in round four, though, and I
Yeah,
just wonder how that goes over. Rune has played well on grass in the
true.
past. He's young and already shown, a level of comfort on the surface. Djokovic not coming in with, I mean, physically, it's a question mark. I think that fourth rounder against Rune could be definitely primed for an upset. And then if he gets past that, I mean, it gets pretty serious, like real quick against Hurkacz potentially. And
Yep.
I mean, it's not going to be easy in the second round of a slam regardless, but. It's just tough to say. In terms of some dark horses, I'm going to mention a name that you always enjoy talking about, and that's RBA,
Wow.
Roberto Bautista
Okay.
Agut.
Yep.
In his draw, I saw to the fourth round, maybe even, I mean, he's made the semis at Wimbledon before, I
Yeah.
believe.
2019 semis.
And I know he's getting older, but I just felt like in his draw, kind of a little bit open there. I don't know if we want to talk about our Canadians now or not, but I thought Denis Shapovalov, to be honest, not a bad draw as he's going up against Jari in round one, who's not known, I don't think, really as a grass court player, and potentially Shelton as the seed in round three. But Shelton doesn't have a huge experience on grass, whereas Shapo's already made the semis at Wimbledon before. So
Yep.
and you spoke again with our guest at length about what Chapo brings to the table and what he can bring to the table, especially on grass. So if there's a place where he could be especially dangerous, I think it's at Wimbledon.
I honestly love Nick Lester's analysis on Shapovalov on his game.
Spot on.
It was really spot on. Like if he can figure out how to win on the bad days, it was really well said. And I do think Dennis has a great draw. Nicholas Jari, like he's a monster on the clay, has not really had any success on the grass. Then you look past maybe Altmaier in the second round. I would like Dennis in that match. And then Ben Shelton hasn't had an amazing grass court lead up. You'd think his game is really suitable for the grass with that huge booming lefty serve. I would love to see like an explosive third round match between those two lefties, but I really think there's a pretty decent path for Dennis to have a shot at the fourth round if he's healthy and well enough to do so. And then you're probably maybe you're looking at Jannik Sinner, and that becomes a different type of challenge. But I think it's doable. If we talk about Felix Auger-Aliassime, who is seated at this event, which is great. I like his chances maybe in the early going against Thanasi Kokkinakis, and I personally had him in the third round before maybe bowing out to Alex de Minaur, who won a grass court title as well, and just looks like an all-surface threat at this point.
It's a tougher draw for Felix than what Dennis got, I feel,
Yeah,
in some ways. And, Kokkinakis, even though Felix is heavily favored, he's kind of that type of player that you never want to count him out.
yeah,
He's missed a lot of time over the years with injuries. I think he appreciates these moments more than most players. He can play in front of big crowds. He, can play well at the majors. I don't think five sets is something that's, daunting to him. So I don't like seeing his name there early on.
hmm
And then de Minaur in round three. I mean, the Aussie's been playing like literally top 10 tennis since we saw him last summer in Toronto making the finals. And so I don't think that's a name that you want. That's one of the top like five names you don't want to see next to you early
yeah.
on in a tournament, I think.
Yeah, really dangerous. I mean, I already mentioned Sebastian Korda. He's kind of my dark horse pick to make a deep run. I'll ask you, I mean, or confirm, is Alcaraz your pick to win the tournament?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Alcaraz. I think based on he's
Okay.
coming in with great confidence. He won there last year, so he knows he could do it again. After him, I mean, Sinner, I'll put Djokovic up there because of his pedigree on grass and the fact that his heart, he even admitted, even if his body's not necessarily there, his heart's definitely there.
Yep.
And then Hurkacz and Rublev to round out, I guess my top five, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, I have Jannik Sinner to win. I was just amazed with how well he played in Halle. I think he's great on a faster surface, even if the grass plays a little slower, as Nick mentioned, than in previous years. I'd love to see another showdown with Alcaraz, best of five, and in a semifinal in this case of a Grand Slam. Again, would be fantastic. So he's my pick to win it on the men's side. Before we shift over to the women's side, I will mention as part of this episode, brought to you by Hotel X, we have a special big shiny ticket giveaway concert being held at Sobe Stadium. 2 tickets to give away for Big Shiny Saturday. That's this upcoming Saturday, July 6th. A concert featuring all Canadian bands: The Tea Party, Headstones, I Mother Earth, Treble Charger, and Biff Naked. So if you want an opportunity to win tickets, simply repost our Wimbledon preview episode. Mike,
It's quite a
let's.
lineup. That's quite a lineup of
It
bands, by the
is.
way,
I
for
know.
anyone in Canada. And
Yeah.
I could tell you, I went to the show at the Bowl at Sobeys Stadium last week with the Bare Naked Ladies and Sam Roberts, and it was pretty fantastic. The sound was great. The sightlines were awesome. It's on center court there at Sobeys Stadium, which is a fantastic venue, not just for tennis. And everyone in attendance had a great time. So yeah, pretty good giveaway. If you're in the Toronto area, you can make it. Then by all means, share our episode to enter and we will draw the tickets sometime this week.
Yeah. Yeah. Please reshare for a chance at a couple free tickets. Women's side action. I didn't cover the women with Nick Lester, who predominantly covers ATP, as I said. I think this is one of the most wide open Wimbledon fields we've had on the women's side in some time. So many question marks, I think, just surrounding some of the top players and their form and their health. Arina Sabalenka, for example, I just read in press that she said she is concerned about her chances and does not feel 100% as she navigates an injury, and she hopes that she can make it through and be competitive and play her best. But there's some concerns there. Elena Rybakina has had a couple withdrawals due to illness. We haven't seen Iga Swiatek play on the grass yet. I don't know. I have more questions than answers in terms of the women's draw, I gotta say.
Agreed. And given that information you just shared, then perhaps we get a bit of a surprise a winner this year. I mean, Sabalenka's draw looks terrific to me as I try and sort of pencil in who I think is going to make it, deep in the draw. I've got like question mark in the fourth round and the two top areas there, question mark again, and then Sabalenka. So if she's healthy, I really like her in that
Yeah.
section of the draw
Yeah.
against all those question marks I have penciled in. Otherwise, I think Coco Gauff has just shown over the past year that she is gotten better and improved on every surface and so much more confident. And look at all the things she's accomplished since this time last year. Even though she hasn't had a deep run at Wimbledon, I feel like this is maybe the last, I mean, not the last hill for her to climb, but I think a hill that she's going to climb. And maybe this is the year that we see it happen. Marketa Vondrousova, what do we expect from the defending champion, and how does she come in and play with that pressure of having to defend those points and being in a position that she hasn't been in before? That'll be really interesting to see. And then in the other half of the draw, I think is kind of loaded. I think that that top half, sorry, with
Yeah.
Swiatek, especially with Rybakina, Jabeur, Pegula down there. And Swiatek, to be honest, on grass, I don't have her in my top three because we haven't seen her have a deep run at Wimbledon yet, and it just hasn't seemed like it's the one area of the tour that she hasn't shown she can, dominate at yet.
Yeah, I think I had ranked her fifth overall in my top 10 power rankings on the grass ahead of Wimbledon. I think she could be capable. We'll see if she sort of survives the first week, but there are a lot of interesting names in that top half of the draw. Ayla Tomljanovic, who just played great, obviously winning that title in Birmingham. So she's looked really good. Yulia Putintseva, she won the first grass court title of her career just the other week and has a really enticing first round match against Angelique Kerber, who got a wild
Mhm.
card. You have Danielle Collins in the mix, who's obviously had this phenomenal career year. Vondrousova, I like her draw. I think Krejcikova lingers there, but I wouldn't be surprised if she, pushes on to the second week and maybe is battling with Iga for a spot in the quarters.
Yeah, she's got
Uh,
a nice path to the quarters. It's just that
she
pressure. I
does.
wonder how she handles that.
Yeah.
There's also some fireworks lurking down at the bottom of the draw, where in the bottom 16 players, you've got Azarenka, who plays Sloane Stephens to start. That's
Yeah.
incredible. You've
Hmm.
got Karolina Pliskova likely getting the winner of that match I just mentioned. You've got Naomi Osaka down there as well. I mean, and that's just one small section of this draw. It's absolute fireworks. I love it. And then you've got the Canadians, and we got three of the Canadians in there, which is fantastic. And it's cool because two of the three are coming off of finalist appearances on grass. Bianca Andreescu at Hertogenbosch
Yep.
this week, Leilani Fernandez in Eastbourne. I should also mention we spoke to both of those players ahead of their grass court campaigns. So, hey, we didn't jinx their chances. That's nice. And then you've got young up and coming Marina Stekusic, who qualified for her first main draw major under the guidance of our friend Rob Steckley. And what a great experience for her to have as well, although she draws the 27 seed Siniakova in her first round.
Yeah, and I've been in touch with Rob Steckley, who, as you said, is working alongside Marina Stikusic. That partnership was originally just the clay court season, and he was there for Roland Garros qualifying, and they carried on through the grass. And look at that success. And I think I'd messaged him the other day. I said, "Wow, she's on fire," and Rob just replied, "She's finding it," which I thought was apt. And as you said, she'll face a tough seeded player in Katerina Sidiakova right away, but she's
And you know, it's
already.
interesting.
Yeah, go
If
ahead.
she wins that match, if Stakushik can surprise, and my goodness, we've seen what she was able to do at Billie Jean King Cup last year. If
Yeah,
she gets through that first round match, she might face Putintseva, who Rob Steckley also has coached in the past. So,
that's
and
true.
in the recent past, actually. So that could be a
Yep.
very interesting dynamic there with the coach knowing both players so well.
Yeah, just a couple summers ago, he was working with Yulia. Bianca Andreescu, if I look at her draw, I think she probably has the best draw of the Canadian women, I would say. Jacqueline Christian, the Romanian in the first round, I like her chances there. Interesting matchup against Linda Noskova, who has had a very good season to date. And then you have lurking in that section, I mean, the number 7 seed, Jasmine Paolini, our recent French Open finalist. How does she fare on the grass? Bianca just, if you go by her form in Den Bosch at the Leibima Open, she looked really, really strong and comfortable. And then you have a couple big time players just below her there, like a Madison Keys, as you mentioned, still in that bottom half. Azarenka, Pliskova, Osaka, Coco Gauff is in that section, and I think sort of the favorite. But I see a good path here for Bianca to maybe make the fourth round and be knocking at the door of the quarters if she's in form.
Yeah, I like her draw best among our Canadian women as well in singles. And it's been a while since she's had an appearance at a second round of a major, and largely in part to, missing time due to injury, coming back just before a slam or not being in, peak shape yet for a 2 week major. But it's exciting times. And, right now, anything's possible with our Canadian players. All those Canadian players are going to be players that are capable of winning matches on the grass. Even Stakushik, I think, who's still learning the surface, and that could work to her advantage too because she's an unknown. I mean, Siniakova is probably like, who am I playing here?
Yeah.
And that can bode well for a player as well.
No, definitely. Leylah Fernandez, as you noted, first career grass court final, reaching the finals at the Rothsay International in Eastbourne. Just a fantastic tournament for her. I was on match coverage for Tennis Canada for a couple of her matches. She played so well in her win against Madison Keys in the semis, just hugging the baseline, redirecting the ball, resisting the huge baseline power that Keys obviously has to offer, and serving well, returning deep and putting her opponent under pressure. Kasukina played a terrific final to beat Leylah, but I thought it was such a good tournament for her. Another step after making the quarterfinals in Birmingham. And I wish she had an easier draw here because I think she's playing so well. And I just see Rybakina lingering there in the third round for her.
I hear you. And Layla Annie's volley is also fantastic on
Yeah.
the grass and really showing how the doubles that she plays. She's a regular doubles player, and she mentioned to us last week how at the Olympics, clearly she's going to be playing doubles alongside Gabby Dabrowski. We know that now. Also hoping to play in mixed doubles, and all that time playing doubles is definitely helping, especially on a faster surface like grass, if you can get up there and close out those points. So that's nice to see. And I think it's kind of funny how she mentioned to us last week that she was in the talking phase of her relationship with grass. And
Yep.
I'm going to keep it PG here, but it looks like it's progressed a little further than the talking
Yes.
phase,
No kidding.
given how well she did at Eastbourne. It's fantastic to see. And she's up to, I believe, number 25 in the rankings now. And, remember about a year or so ago when she was around that 80 mark and she told us like she wasn't happy to be there. Look at all the work she's put in and how far she's come to get back inside the top 30 and moving towards the top 20 in the women's game once again.
Yeah, it's just incredibly well deserved. We know the work she puts in. And as you said, if you haven't had a chance, check out our 22nd episode of Matchpoint Canada, our conversation with Leylah, who shared a lot about just the transition to the grass, some fun rapid fire questions, talking about her relationship with her sister as well. She'll open against the Italian Lucia Bronzetti the Tuesday morning. I like her chances in that match. I want to talk about one other player before maybe we close in on our picks and a couple dark horses. What do you think of Ons Jabeur and maybe her draw an opportunity here to try and make another run at Wimbledon?
I mean, it's not the greatest in the sense that she's going to face potentially Lena Svitolina in the third round. Svitolina's done well on grass before.
She
Svitolina,
has.
who's seeded, what is she, 15th? No, 21st.
Yeah.
But I still consider her a top 20 player for sure. Then potentially Pagula, who's played well on grass lately.
Mhm.
Pagula, who's got so much to still prove at the majors, wanting to go further. Um, and then maybe Rybakina in the quarters. So I don't know. I mean, I want Jabeur to have that moment so badly. I think we've mentioned that before too, but I don't think that the draw gods were particularly kind to her in this case.
Okay. Have you made a pick to win this title?
Well, I'm going to go with Rebecca. And if
Okay.
I just, push aside, how she's feeling, and let's just assume all things being equal, um, I think I'm going to go with her. Her game, transitions so well to the grass. She's been successful there before. I put her above the others just a little bit.
Yeah, I've been waffling a lot. I will be honest. Originally, I picked Arena Sabalenka. I think I have to stay with that. Even hearing the reports that she's sort of navigating an injury, I think she's great on this surface. She could have won it last year. You forget how close she was to beating on Jabeur in the semifinals. I think if she sort of overcomes any obstacles in that first week, she could face Daria Kasatkina potentially a few rounds into this tournament. That could be very difficult, but I like Sabalenka's chances if she's healthy to get through the bottom half, maybe have a showdown with Coco Gauff in that semifinal to get to the final. And then the other half, the draw, is really hard to project. I actually have Ons Jabeur circled for another final, but I'm not very
Oh, right on.
confident. I'm not very confident in it. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of dark horses, if I look at the draw, I mean, what about someone like the ace queen, Karolina Pliskova,
Yeah.
who's, had great success at Wimbledon in the past, hasn't been the same type of player over the last year or so, but that big serve, if she can make it out of that group of death at the bottom there, then who knows? I put Bianca in that dark horse category
Yep.
for sure. And what about Mira Andreeva, who had such a fantastic French Open? What can the 17-year-old do on grass? Is she ready to continue that development on this surface? I say that she could do it.
Another name I circled, and she defeated Bianca Andreescu in that final in Den Bosch. Ludmila Samsonova. Her style of play, her big baseline game from the back of the court, really works well on this fast surface just with how hard she hits the ball, and she moves well on the surface too. She's the 15th seed, and she has a pretty nice draw. Maybe Kalinskaya in the third round. I like her there, and she is in that section with Leylah and Rybakina in a potential round of 16 matchup. So that would be pretty good as well.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And look, just before we wrap up the episode and look at some Olympic announcements for Team Canada, a quick word from our sponsor this week, Hotel X. And if you're looking for the perfect urban getaway for your next family vacation, look no further than Hotel X Toronto, the city's premier urban resort. With its state-of-the-art fitness facility, 10XTO, 4 indoor tennis courts, there's something for everyone in the family. But that's not all Hotel X has to offer. With luxurious amenities from the rooftop pool to the award-winning Guerlain Spa, from the 250-seat cinema to the 3-level sky bar, there's so much to see and do all under one roof. Whether you're visiting Toronto for business or pleasure, Hotel X is the perfect choice for families and individuals alike. Book your stay today at Toronto's only urban resort, Hotel X Toronto. Experience the extraordinary.
Yeah, and as you said, the Canadian Olympic roster officially announced. We will have 5 athletes going to the Summer Games in Paris in July, and the names go as follows: Leylah Annie Fernandez, Bianca Andreescu, Gabby Dabrowski, Felix Auger-Aliassime, and I think the one I'm most happy about, Milos Raonic, to round that out. And Leylah will be playing doubles with Gabby Dabrowski. Milos will play men's doubles with Felix, and the mixed doubles team, which hasn't officially been announced. I'm guessing it will be Leylah and Felix, but that's yet to be confirmed.
That would be my guess as well.
Yeah.
But Gabby's the best doubles player we
Actually,
have.
maybe Gabby. Sorry.
So to
You
be
could,
honest,
yeah, it
now
could
that
be
you think
Gabby
about
and
it,
Felix. That's true. Yep.
I would go Gabby and Felix, although I think Leylah and Felix would also be a nice combination, and
True.
having the two Montrealers together would definitely be something that the Montrealer and me would be happy and proud to see. But great to see 5 fantastic individuals representing our country at the Olympic Games. All 5 of them are wonderful people, aside from being terrific tennis players. We definitely are pleased to see Milos there because when he came back last summer and spoke with us at length on the podcast, he mentioned that one of the things he was really hopeful for was to be able to play in Paris at the games. And despite the fact that clay is not his favorite surface, I think really it's just having the opportunity to go and do this one last time, to wear the maple leaf and the red and white. And I just think, given all he's been through, really nice to see him afforded this opportunity. Um, I also think we've got chances at medals there.
Yeah.
Right? Leylah has shown that on clay she could be quite successful. Gabby's a threat on any surface in women's doubles. Felix has comfort level on clay as well. And again, what do the draws look like? Who's going to be coming in from a long grass court season and maybe a little bit tired heading into that portion? Who perhaps goes out a little earlier at Wimbledon, and the silver lining to that is more time to prepare on clay and head back to Paris to get ready for that. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But, the Olympic Games are so exciting, not just in tennis, but to see all those sports. And they only come along every 4 years, the Summer Games. But for tennis, this is a real niche thing that can be added to someone's, resume. And for some players who haven't tasted Grand Slam success, someone like a Belinda Bencic, for example, who won silver medal in doubles last time around in Tokyo, gold medal in singles. This is something that I feel like at the end of someone's career, if you didn't get a slam, but you got an Olympic medal, I bet you cherish that just as much.
Yeah, that's well said. Completely with you. I will say I actually think for the women's doubles portion, you could argue Leylah and Gabby as one of the top favorites to medal. That's going to be
Along with
such.
whoever the Czechs have, the Czechs
Yeah.
are always so good in
Oh,
doubles,
of
right?
course, probably
Yeah,
Siniakova and Krejcikova if they both attend, which I imagine they've both qualified. I'd have to look at their team listed, but yeah, Leylah and Gabby will be an absolute force, I think, in doubles, and hopefully the draw is forgiving for them. I'm so happy and thrilled for Bianca and Leylah, who both expressed their interest and hope to represent Canada at the Olympics. I think all of our athletes have a lot of pride for representing Canada. And as we had this conversation, Mike, we're both rocking the red to celebrate Canada Day this weekend. So happy Canada Day to all our Canadian listeners joining us. And we hope it's a great fortnight at Wimbledon.
absolutely. Happy
Yeah,
Canada Day for all of our listeners, not just the Canadian ones, but the
yeah.
ones that, yep, have an
Check in.
affinity to our country, and who will hopefully be descending upon Toronto and Montreal for the National Bank Open in a few weeks. One last question I want to just throw out there, but I wonder how different our Olympic team will look in 4 years. Clearly, Milos will not be there. I feel like the others could all be in the mix. You think Denis Shapovalov would like to get in there as well? Maybe Marina Stakusic continues
I
her
was gonna
incredible
say.
rise and has a say in it as well. It's be interesting to see what it looks like, the Canadian tennis landscape 4 years from now.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how Wimbledon shakes out as well, guys. We will check in a week's time to see how the action is unfolding at the All England Club. I thank Nick Lester for joining us. Thank you to Hotel X, guys. You've been listening to Matchpoint Canada. We will talk to you next time.